more people die every day around the world in road crashes than died in 9/11. At least in my country, we're still taking off our shoes to go through security, but we don't do as much with road safety.
Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 10 of the Squeaky Wheel podcast. We speak with leading influencers about policy, industry and more across cycling, walking and all other forms of human-scaled mobility. My name is Phil Latz and I've been squeaking via various causes for over 40 years.
And I'm Irene McAleese, co-founder of the cycling technology and data company CSense. We're on a mission to help cities transform for more cycling and micromobility using data.
Irene, you flew solo for this episode. Please tell our listeners where you went and a little about your trip.
Yes, so it was strange not having you there with me, Phil.
You poor thing.
Yes, I'm getting used to our witty repartee, but yes, soldiered on alone without you. It was definitely a great conversation, and it was a privilege actually to speak with Wes. He really is an inspiring person, and he captivated the entire Australasian Road Safety Conference.
Irene, did you know that Tern just launched the latest version of their Bosch-powered Vectron e-bike?
That's the folding one, right?
Yep. Folding bikes are interesting. They can swing too far one way or another. Either they fold up tiny but ride rough, or they ride great but weigh a ton and barely fold. But the Vectron rides like a full-size e-bike and folds small enough to slide under a desk or into a camper. Tern calls it their Goldilocks bike.
Ah, I see here now that it's got a belt drive.
That's a game changer. Folding bikes get handled a lot through train stations, in and out of cars, and a greasy chain can make a mess. The Gates belt drive is clean, quiet, and nearly maintenance-free.
Plus, it's paired with the Nexus 5 hub, so there's no derailleur to snag when you fold it.
Yep, and that's a hub built for e-bikes, handling the smooth Bosch torque with ease. Put it all together and you've got a folding e-bike that's just right. Our guest this month is Wes Marshall, who's the author of the thought-provoking book Killed by a Traffic Engineer, which I am holding in my hand, Irene. I just bought a copy.
Hold that up, Phil, and I'll get a photo of you.
Okay. He talked in Perth, as you mentioned, after he'd given his keynote address to the 2025 Australasian Road Safety Conference.
I'm delighted to be here in person with Professor Wes Marshall at the Australasian Road Safety Conference here in Perth. My co-host Phil Latz couldn't be here, so I'm flying solo on this one.
Well, you got me with you.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about who you are, Wes. So we have Wes Marshall, PhD, Professor of Civil Engineering at the University of Colorado in Denver, where he holds a joint appointment in urban planning. He plays a pivotal role as director of the University of Colorado's Human-Centered Transportation Program and their Transportation Research Center. Wes is a licensed professional engineer and focuses on transportation teaching and research dedicated to creating safer and more sustainable transportation systems. Wes is not a stranger to podcasts. He has his own podcast with co-host David Zipper, and he's also the author of a new book which has been making waves around the world called Killed by a Traffic Engineer, shattering the delusion that science underpins the transportation system. Wes, a huge welcome to the Squeaky Wheel podcast.
It's good to be here.
Wes, you have travelled here all the way from Denver to Perth to deliver a keynote at the Australasian Road Safety Conference. Today is now the third day of the conference. So how have you found the conference so far, and what are your thoughts on Perth?
The conference has been great. It's been fun to be here. Perth is very, very far from Denver, so once you get here, it's good. So, I got a chance to explore a little bit. I was pretty busy yesterday with, the presentation, and then we had a debate after, but today I got to get out and actually get on the train and see some different neighborhoods outside of downtown. So it's been interesting to see this because I spent some time here in 2017 on sabbatical, but most of that was in Sydney or up and down the other coast. So to see a different city and sort of think about the comparisons to the other, even Australian cities I'm more familiar with, has been fun.
Great. Oh, that's nice that you've got that contrast, that you have been here in Australia before, even though it was a few years ago,
Yeah.
and to see a new city for the first time.
Even on the way here, I spent 2 days in Sydney, so I even get to see some of the changes that have happened there since 2007.
Okay.
Like they built the metro and the light rail, and in 2017, I thought their transit was pretty good, but just to see how much more they built has been kind of cool to see all that happening.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of parallels with Denver, or is it quite different?
Oh, Sydney is different. I mean, even compared to Perth, just how many people are in Sydney. Like, I mean, I got off the train from the airport here in Perth and I walked to the hotel and I think I saw maybe one or two people that whole mile long or kilometer and a half long walk. In Sydney, wherever you go, there's just people everywhere. So it's a different vibe for sure.
Yeah. Wes, I read your book, part of it on the very long flight over here from Brisbane, which is 5 hours. And one of the things that you sort of start off with is that you mentioned that when you grew up, you were able to ride your bike around your neighborhood and you walked. But when you moved towns when you were older and went to study, you ended up in a more car-dominated environment. How did that experience inspire you to go down this very deep rabbit hole that you definitely went down when you looked at what traffic engineers are actually taught at school?
At first, I mean, growing up, I didn't really think transportation was a big deal because it was so easy. Like when you can walk or bike and get to where you want without it being a problem, you didn't really think about it. And when I did first move to a place where I couldn't leave my street without being in a car, it drove me crazy. I mean, it made me angry. And as someone that was also doing this sort of work, like designing these sorts of places, I would ask the older engineers, like, well, why do we do it this way? Like, why do we do it that way? And, there was, one or two of them that would indulge my nonsensical questions and try to explain a little bit, but we didn't have time for that. You're at a consulting firm, right? You have to finish the project, get the new project. So, I mean, just me, wanting to know why and really being bothered by what I was seeing and it never living up to what I knew could be. It just drove me back to graduate school. And I did it right after I got my PE. So I got my PE. And that's sort of when you take a step up in these firms. And I was like, no, I'm leaving. I'm quitting. I'm going back to graduate school. My boss was like, well, why are you doing that? Like, we don't hire people with PhDs. I was like, well, I don't really want to work here anymore. I want to go something else and do something different. So it was a lot of things coming together at the same time, but anger is probably one of the best ways to describe what happened.
So you're the kind of person that asked all those annoying questions and nobody could answer them. So you're like, right, I'm just going to have to go and figure out yourself. And it's some pretty deep rabbit holes you went down, I have to say, from your book. One of the things that really jumped out at me is just the sheer scale of the problem. You do highlight in your book some really shocking stats, like the fact that more Americans actually died in fatal crashes in just 2 years on our roads than they did in the Vietnam War, which lasted for almost 20 years. I mean, that is just, it's really staggering when you think about it like that, isn't it?
It is. And I teach a safety class where we sort of go through different ways to think about it, to look about it. And even, one of the stats, I think my class, for some reason, it resonates with them, is that more people die every day around the world in road crashes than died in 9/11. So in like a single day and an average day, like more people die on the streets than on that big terrorist attack.
Yeah.
And at least in my country, we're still taking off our shoes to go through security. I mean, because of that sort of thing, like we're still doing a lot to try to, make sure we don't have those problems again, but we don't do as much with road safety. We sort of treat it as the cost of doing business as opposed to something we can fix.
It's interesting that you say that because the espoused theory in use sort of research, would think, what we do is safety first. But what you're saying is actually under the hood, it's really not safety first. What is first? What are engineers thinking about then when they are designing?
I mean, to be fair, engineers were taught that safety is first. Like, we're taught that everything we do, safety is embedded within these things. So if we, our protocols are essentially about capacity, or not even capacity today, capacity maybe 20 years in the future, to make sure we are designing it in a way where we don't have too much delay or too much traffic in some foreseeable future. And the thinking is, if we do that, we'll have a safe street. And those aren't connected. Like if you go back in the research down those rabbit holes, and in that process, I didn't want to really just point out why. I mean, I didn't want to point out what we're doing wrong. I really want to understand why we're doing these things. And like in those cases, like you see, it's like, well, yes, we're doing it this way, but safety was never included in this. And in fact, those early engineers said in the future, we need to embed safety within this, but we never did that. So like we're still taught that safety is part of it, but it isn't. And that's what I'm trying to help. I mean, me as a traffic engineer and the other ones understand that what we were being taught isn't quite so.
So what you're saying is that when these standards or guides were written a while ago, that there was maybe an assumption that they would evolve, they would take on new insights, that they would change and be adapted and not just blindly followed.
Yeah. I mean, you can understand what they're doing at first. Like they're engineers. Like what we do is we try stuff. And the goal is to see if it works. And if it does work, we double down. If it doesn't, we pull back and try something different. But what often happens, like we have these theories and we put it out there in place and we try it for a while. But then by the time like we're getting good data or something to try to figure out whether it's working or not, it's another generation of engineers.
Yeah.
So they're just being told what to do as being told that we need to double check this. And then another generation later, it just gets kind of more deeper in stone. It's like it's handed down from Mount Sinai to Moses on these tablets. And we don't really think too much about it. You have to just assume when you're a young engineer that whoever wrote these books knows more than you do. And you have to assume that they did their homework. You assume that they thought about safety.
I love the example you gave in your keynote, actually, where you were talking about speed. And there was actually that assumption that increasing the speed on the road made it safer, such that you had this crossing where there had been, was it a death? And
there was 2 deaths. It was Zelza Avenue in Los Angeles, and there was 2 pretty high-profile pedestrian deaths, and both these women were in the crosswalk with the right-of-way. So the city wanted to do a safety study to try to figure out how we can fix this. And part of the safety study was a speed study. And the speed study told them that, if you use the 85th percentile methodology, we don't need to get into what that really is, but it told them that they should raise the limit. And then it became an even more dangerous street. They had like 13 severe or fatal injuries over the next few years. So they did the same thing, another safety study, another speed study. And that told them they should raise the speed limit again. So they did it again. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, from any, common sense, logical human being, you can look at that and says, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
And at the same time, for engineers, I don't know, like we also take physics classes. Like we should know better. Like we know about kinetic energy. We know about force equals mass times accelerator, like that sort of stuff. But, these old studies made us think that raw speed doesn't matter. It's all about pace. As long as all the cars are within the same band, it doesn't matter if that band is really fast or really slow. Like that's all that matters. And like more and more research just shows us that that's just not true. Like speed does matter. Like it is still fundamentally about a physics.
One of the other things that you mentioned in your keynote was that the stats were quite shocking for US compared to some of the other countries in the developed world. Why do you think there's that disparity? Not that I think there's been a flattening or a stagnation in the performance of some of the other countries as well, but what is it about the US that's really making that huge disparity?
If you go back a little further, I didn't get a chance to do this in the keynote, but if you look at the early 70s, Australia, those European countries, the US were all pretty equal in terms of road safety if we measure it per population. There wasn't that much of a difference. And the US got a little bit better since the 70s, but all these other countries got way better. And there's a lot of reasons I can point to for what I think it is. I mean, for the US especially, I think the biggest problem is that we just think we have a huge, massive human error problem. We just blame every crash on the people that were involved with it. Like they were speeding, they were jaywalking, they were doing whatever they were doing. And, I think everyone, at least in the US, I guess I can talk about another study. We did what's called the scofflaw bicycling survey many years ago, where we asked people, how they behave in certain situations. And we gave them a spectrum of behaviors, from complete law abiding up to sort of reckless. And the survey went viral. So we got like 18,000 survey responses within like a month. And this is like a, 40-minute survey people were taking with like these pictures telling what to do. But out of the 18,000 responses, 100% of them admitted to breaking the law in the transportation system on a regular basis, which means we're all going out there doing something. We're speeding a little bit, whatever we're doing. So whenever a crash happens, it's always our fault because we're always doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So there's no feedback loop for engineers as to what they could do better. So it's a misunderstanding of human error. Like when you think about all these things we do as errors, it doesn't help us get any better. What they really are is they're just normal behaviors given the built environment that we put in front of people. People are behaving rationally given what we've given them, but it's not really an error then. So if we treat those crashes differently, as if there is something we could do with engineering, then we could start to get better, but we don't. Like we still, just think, our system is safe. If you all just follow the rules of the road, you'd be safe too. And that's one of the differences I'm seeing in the other countries. They're realizing that that's not enough. Like we can't just try to put out PSAs and try to enforce our way to safety. Like that can only get you so far.
It's maddening, isn't it? I mean, when I lived in Northern Ireland, there was a road at the end of this cul-de-sac that we lived on, and it ran along the loch. And so it's a beautiful part of the world, but every other week there was a crash on this loch. I mean, in the 6 years that I was there, I think I saw some cars that ended up in the loch, or a lot don't even get reported because they didn't hit another vehicle, they hit a tree, and if the police doesn't come, it doesn't end up in any crash stats. But you would have the Facebook discussions, and even the local people there would be, it's all the driver's fault. Sure, they should be driving better on the road. And I'm like, I think the road is not that good.
I mean, I'm not saying we don't want to hold people responsible. Like that's useful for the insurance companies, for the police. But it's not useful for like engineers and planners. Like, we need to understand that there's a connection between the built environment that people have in front of them and how they behave. And we can entice better behavior with different designs and vice versa. Yeah.
I mean, you do talk a lot about in your book that just blaming everything on human behavior is really just letting the engineer off the hook a bit, because human error really isn't the root cause of most safety problems. So from an equity point of view, how would you say decisions that are being made by traffic engineers are affecting other road users such as cyclists and pedestrians?
I think pedestrians and cyclists are treated almost as second-class citizens. Like our protocols, our procedures are all based upon predicting how many cars there are going to be in some far-off future and then making sure we accommodate those cars. And that's the difference between the theory and use and the espoused theory. Like we say we're going to put pedestrians first and prioritize them and bicyclists and transit. But in practice, we don't actually do that. Like it's still all about cars. And at the end of the way I was taught to design a roadway is I start at the center line. Then you sort of figure out how much space you need to give cars, and you do that first. And then you might figure out if you need for bikes or transit or parking. And at the end, whatever's left over goes to the pedestrians, right? If we actually did what we say and put pedestrians sort of at the top of our prioritization, you might start very differently. Like let's start designing from the outside in, where well, how much space do pedestrians need? And then you give them their space, and then you do it for transit and bikes. And at the end of the day, whatever's left over goes to cars, even if it's nothing. That's an extreme example because in the US, nobody would ever do that right now. Like it's still some far distant future, but that is kind of what we say we're doing, but we're not close to doing.
So a data-driven approach to safety is obviously extremely useful, but I thought your book was very interesting because you do talk about quite a lot of challenges with the current crash data. Could you elaborate on that a little more for our listeners?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's very logical. Like we all want a more data-driven approach to road safety. It's hard to argue with that, but if you actually dig into the data, like if the data's wrong, then what are we doing? Like we need to make sure the data is good. I can point to so many issues. Like we know there's chronic underreporting for bike and ped crashes or crashes with lower income communities. In our country, like minority and immigrant communities, they have lower reporting rates of crashes. And, there's a big disconnect between the level of severity that the police might find in their reports versus what the hospitals find when an actual doctor looks at these people. So crash severity is another tricky one to wrap your head around. And And then the human error thing is part of it. Like when I go through my database, every crash is telling me that we have a human error problem instead of pointing us in other directions where
how it gets categorized. Yeah.
It's categorized.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
in the examples I gave in the keynote, those kids that were walking to school, right? Clearly, these kids did the most rational thing. Like they crossed the street, and yes, they jaywalked, but like the nearest crosswalk was like a half mile away. There was no sidewalks between then and there. But we're blaming these kids for doing what we're kind of telling them to do. And it puts us in a situation where we think we need to solve it by telling kids not to jaywalk instead of trying to solve it by making a better crossing.
Yeah. Yeah. So 2 kids that were involved in a crash, it's because they jaywalked. It's not because there was a fault in the design. It's categorized as a human error.
Right. So if we're trying to, you have these giant Excel spreadsheets or using whatever program you use to work with this data, and you're trying to organize your contributing factors of these crashes, it's telling you have a jaywalking problem.
In a previous life, in my undergrad degree, I did workplace health and safety. And what's that pyramid? Give all of the near miss events on the bottom, and then the deaths at the top.
It's like the industrial accident pyramid. I mean, the idea of it is that it's all proportional. The number of near misses is proportional to the number of total crashes. The number of total crashes is proportional to.
You can't translate that from the industrial world necessarily.
A lot of crashes usually end up with a lot of fender benders and not many severe injuries and fatal crashes. There's usually crashes at low speeds. Like in cities, where you have just a lot of hectic things going on, you get a lot of low-speed crashes where no one's dying. At the other end of the spectrum, like when you have more fatal and severe crashes, you're getting fewer crashes. So when you look at the data, it's not proportional. And the problem is, too, if you just assume that, near hits, I like to call them.
Yes.
And if you nearly miss something, that means you're hit it. But if you use near miss and near hit, or just use total crashes, and assuming that leads to fewer fatalities is kind of the problem, because it leads us to build more highway-like designs, because those have fewer total overall crashes, like per mile or something, or per kilometer, versus the safest places where fewer people are dying might have more fender benders.
Right. So you might be seeing more near misses, but they're of a lower intensity.
Right.
So that's maybe it's not the same as
near misses are created equal. Near misses at very low speeds are probably not a bad thing. Like near misses at very high speeds, like those dangerous ones. I mean, I don't know, but it leads you away from building places that are basically better for walking and biking, like where there is more interactions, where there is more, perhaps fender benders, but fewer fatalities, fewer severe injuries.
One thing I had to laugh at reading your book was that you talked about a problem that engineers have with the so-called squeaky wheels that are at community consultations. Obviously, our podcast is called The Squeaky Wheel, and you recounted in some of your early days where you were wheeled out to provide what you call the DAD acronym, decide, announce, and defend a decision. I got to ask more about this. Tell us what that experience was like.
Yeah, when you're a young engineer and you're doing your first public meeting type things where, in theory, we're supposed to go out to these communities and get their input and try to take their input and embed it into our design and try to figure out what would be best for the community. In practice, at least in some of the firms I worked at, we already had done the design. Like we know what we want to do. And when we go to these meetings, it's our job to basically make it go as quickly and easily as possible and painlessly for the community. We've already made the decision. We don't really want their input, but this is just a box we need to check. The community meeting is something required in our contract. We go out there. We've already decided. So that DAD acronym was something my boss told me before my first public meeting. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. And if you come back to the office and we have to redesign, like, I'm in trouble. Like, I need to squash any and all feedback that we're getting in those meetings. At the same time, the squeaky wheel question you asked, it reminds me of like equity too. Like I was looking at some data. We have a 311 type thing where people can call and complain about their city. And what ends up happening is that if you look at who calls, it's usually the wealthier, whiter communities that are complaining.
Okay.
Those are also the ones that, because of that, the city's coming out to fix their roads and they're making those roads safer, and the roads in the other communities aren't getting it. So I remember talking to someone with one city, like, oh, I'm just noticing that there's, 4-way stop signs around all the parks and schools in the wealthier neighborhoods, but there's 2-way stop signs in the poor neighborhoods. And like, well, they're the ones complaining. So we just want to put it in to make them happy. And that's why we're getting such an equity difference in safety too, is the squeaky wheel thing is real.
And more likely to respond to travel surveys and that kind of thing as well. It's interesting though, because some traffic engineers, it's really a confronting thing to have to turn up to these sessions as well, where what they perceive as being the noisy minority that could be there. And talking to real people is kind of an uncomfortable thing when your natural predisposition as an engineer is maybe I like numbers.
Possibly for you're in the face, but the thinking is too, like whoever comes out to these meetings is going to be against you anyways.
Right.
And our thinking is that they're not representative of the overall community. Like, so it doesn't really matter how much pushback we're getting. It's like, it's just the minority people. Don't worry about it. Just, we use some engineering jargon to kind of shut them up and walk off the other way. And, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we'll study that. Thanks for your input. We never do.
That's going to be my next question. Actually, was you actually list sort of a whole range of different engineer speak in inverted commas that advocates could look out for in the discussions. One of the phrases that you mentioned, I think it's the first off the list, is that safety is a shared responsibility. What does that mean, and how can an advocate counter that?
It sort of means it's your fault. Right? So that part of the book, even despite the title of the book isn't just for engineers. I'm really trying to help people understand what engineers are thinking and maybe give them the ammunition to more effectively argue with an engineer. So you could,
I love that.
Understand the jargon and how we, like when we say something's a standard, it's actually probably a guideline. So, of course, we're not going to use green stop signs, but everything else is pretty much a guideline. And we have a lot of more leeway than we'd lead people to believe. But safety as a shared responsibility is an interesting one because when, someone complains, let's say even an extreme example where somebody was just killed, like let's say a pedestrian or a bicyclist was killed at a intersection, and the advocates or the community's out in force trying to get them to put in a better sidewalk or crossing or bike facility, whatever it is. Like the engineers, like their mindset is like, well, we don't actually need this facility because safety is a shared responsibility. That means the drivers, the bicyclists, everyone just has to do what we're telling them to do. Like the system is safe already. If you all just follow the rules of the road, you'd be safe too.
Human error.
So it's almost like a cop out. It lets us off the hook in terms of doing anything. And I would say, well, the responsibility is on us too as engineers and planners. Like when you say it's shared, like we're almost pawning it off on everyone else. We should be looking in the mirror a little bit more. So how can an advocate counter that? That's a good question. It probably depends on the actual context in the case. But the reality is I think you have to sometimes go out and really just watch like your facility for like a long period of time. Like engineers are good at, looking at our CAD monitors, and we assume if everyone follows the rules of the road, they'll be safe. But if we actually go to these places and see how people really behave, it's not, it doesn't connect the dots to what we think is going to happen out there. So when you see that in action, if an engineer goes out there and watches it, then you start thinking about how you need to design it differently, where that safety is a shared responsibility is like we can change the design to help people be better in that kind of situation. Yeah. So how do you get to an engineer to go out to do that is difficult. But I think, when you confront them with reality versus what their perceived reality is the disconnect you need to bridge.
Okay, that's great. So what about the idea then that automated vehicles are going to come and solve all the safety issues? I did notice in your book that you mentioned that the last time you came to Australia, there was thunderous applause in the room for the idea that they are going to help save all of the mobility issues. Do you think they'll live up to that in reality?
I hope so, but I don't think that reality is that close. I think it's far off distance still. Like when you look at a lot of the benefits of autonomous vehicles, a good portion of them come only when the whole system is autonomous. Like when you have a mix of human drivers and bicyclists and pedestrians with the autonomous cars, it's a lot dicier in terms of what the outcomes might be. And that's been the case with every technology that's ever come in. Like we think something will fix all these problems, and it rarely fixes all the problems, but it often can lead to new ones too. So if it does fix one problem, it might lead to other ones. I mean, that example from the City Talks thing in Sydney I went to, it was a guy from MIT, and he showed this gray animation and said this was the future of urbanism. But what he was showing would not work if there was one human in there.
Right.
So in my head, I was like, this is the future maybe of the middle of nowhere, but it's never going to be the future of anywhere in the city. We don't want to get rid of pedestrians and bicyclists. Like those are what make cities vibrant. So that's not a future we should be even striving for. And then if you look at the most recent studies on safety of autonomous vehicles, like they seem to be safer a lot of times of the day, but not at dawn, dusk, or when turning. This is the most recent study I saw. They also don't do a great job of stopping for pedestrians in dark, nighttime conditions, or when that pedestrian has darker skin. So that's not ideal either, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you start thinking, like, what's going to happen, in a place like Denver when it snows? Will these work or not? What if your car gets dusty? What if, we're going to require people to wash their cars? And then I'm thinking about, maybe me as a high schooler, if there's autonomous cars everywhere and they design them to stop for pedestrians in theory, I should be able to close my eyes and walk out into the street like Moses parting the Red Seas, and all these. So we're going to have high school kids bullying autonomous cars. What's the alternative? Either we let that happen or we program them to run these kids over. It's got to be one or the other. You start getting all these social cultural issues.
Sure.
It just isn't as simple as people think. And they might help, but, there's a lot of social cultural issues that are part of it that aren't as simple to solve.
I think I heard you say in the keynote as well that there are some basic things, if we're genuinely interested about improving safety in our cities, that we could do, such as fixing the footpath.
Yeah.
Or putting in a bike lane, which is going to be significantly cheaper, right?
Yeah. The sidewalk, make those are good. When I think about technologies that help everybody, like Siri was a technology that was invented for, people that are blind, right? But it ends up being technology that everyone can use because, it's sort of useful in a lot of different ways. But things like curb ramps, right? That's something that we often put in for the disabled community, but it helps so many more people. If you have a stroller or a pram or a scooter, that sort of stuff, that sort of focus on trying to make it work for everybody, and even that it's maybe disabled community, but it ends up working better for everybody if you do it that way.
What are the precursors you see for innovation to take place?
First off, I would say, isn't that the way engineering should be done?
Right.
We see a problem, we try to solve it the best we can, and we collect data, we learn from it, and that's the way engineering is and should be.
It was great to see.
Right.
Yeah.
But part of what I'm trying to show in the book is those standards that a lot of us are following aren't based in science like we think. So that gives them even more, wherewithal to do this stuff like they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think what's holding a lot of people back is a fear of being sued, a fear of liability, right? They think if they do something outside of the book that they might get sued, or even the local council might be fearful of that, not just the consultant. But if you do it like they're doing, and in the book, I sort of go through a way you can protect yourself from liability, and it's that is what you described there. And if you know you have a problem and you do a good job of, laying out the alternatives that you have in front of you, you pick one, you put some rationale behind what you pick, and then you collect the data to see if you actually solve the initial problem. That process protects you from it being something you can use a lawsuit over. But it also takes time. It also means, making it a little bit more iterative, where we need to collect the data, because most engineers, they work in a way we do it, we're done, we're out. We put out our end all be all on day one. But to me, engineering design should be a little bit more incremental. It should be something that we sometimes have to take baby steps and learn from. It's just we don't do it that way very often. But
is it true that we won't reach the Vision Zero targets? Or did you just say that to win the debate? And if we aren't going to win it, what can we do to
I
close
think
the gap?
we could but I don't think we're willing to do what we would need to do to hit those targets. Like, there's really no evidence. Yeah, we know if we could slow speeds this for the United States, like 20 or 25 miles per hour in cities and whatever it would be in kilometers per hour here, that we could, almost eliminate pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities in urban areas. But we're not willing to take that step, right?
Well,
That's part of the problem. And if you look at the data, like I think we were arguing about the 21 to 30, like 2021 to 2030 goals. And that's not the zero deaths. It's like half deaths from what they were in 21. But Australia's been going the wrong direction since they've instituted that as their goal. So
your book is actually meticulously researched. I was really impressed to see, the amount of references and also the fun footnotes. You're obviously a Simpsons fan, I take it.
I'm literally writing about kids dying on the road. So it would be a tough read if there wasn't some levity in there. And, I write so many academic papers that this is a chance for me to put my personality into the book. And I honestly just wanted to make something that, like my buddies from college who aren't in this space would just be able to read and be
It's a great read.
Enjoy,
It's a great read. Buy the book, everyone. It is very good. It has got a pretty provocative title. Are you intending to create an evolution or a revolution amongst your peers?
I mean, they probably have 75 or 80 like published journal papers and all those things. Like I'm sort of attacking the same problem, but I felt like I was just chipping away at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
It was never really fixing it. So I just thinking about, well, how can we do better? There's such a foundational shift that is needed. I mean, that's why the book came to be. Like, I felt like I needed to do something bigger. It had to be, more than just like a sequence of research papers. It had to be something just different.
It's certainly got people's attention and you're helping to get the message out.
And the title it's kind of true. We're not doing it on purpose. Like that's if engineers, there are some engineers that are turned off by the title and refuse to read it. Like there's some in our country, some state DOTs that have banned my book from their libraries.
Oh, wow.
But those same state DOTs, they've had secret book clubs with my book. So I've gone on Zoom calls.
You're like, yes, they banned it. It's going to be more popular.
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure they banned me. This is great.
Yeah. Oh,
but if they read it, they'll see that I'm not blaming them. I mean, or us. Like,
no.
I use we a lot in the book, but we're just doing what we were taught. But what we were taught isn't quite so. But for me to show that, I had to do the research, and I am a researcher, so this was something I love doing and digging down those rabbit holes. Yeah. And COVID gave me a chance and the time to do that. And I was ordering, tons of books from like 1930s and 40s and all that sort of stuff. It was fun, but I fully understand that most people don't have a job or the time to do what I did. But as a professor who has tenure and during COVID, people left me alone for long stretches of time.
Right.
I could do this. So my goal is just to provide everyone else with what I found and like, here, see for yourself. Like, this is why we do what we do. And when you see some of those things, you're like, wait, what? This is why we do that? Really? Like, that's the study?
It's really wonderful. You've done a fantastic job, Wes, in bringing all of that insight together. It's incredibly impressive to read. One last question is really just over to you. And we come to the end of our interview now. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think, I wish that Irene had asked me that? Throw that in. Here's your chance.
It's kind of funny because it is a long book. It's like 400 pages. And the questions I get are kind of all over the map. Like people end up focusing on very different things. Like some people, like the engineer speak is something that you kind of honed in on. But other people just focus on very different things too. Yeah. So I always find it interesting just to hear what people kind of walk away with and what speaks to them. And it's not been, there's not just one thing. So like even in my presentation yesterday, I couldn't do justice to the book. Like I'm kind of telling some stories, and some of the stories I told yesterday weren't even in the book. Like it's stuff I've kind of found after the fact. There's just so much in this world. And I'm just glad people care. Like I thought I'd put this book out there, I'd go back to my job, and there'd be some transportation nerds that read it, and like maybe in 10 years people would see that I was right. But the fact that I get to come halfway around the world to Perth and just feeling that people really care about road safety, like much more than I thought. I thought part of the problem with road safety is that too many people are apathetic towards it.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a faucet dripping. It's annoying, but who really cares? But people really care.
People do. Yeah. There's a lot of passion, and that gives us hope, doesn't it? That
I put my
That's-
heart and soul
yeah.
doing this, and I think somebody told me, like, hey, you're right, like, you just are angry sometimes. Like, what kind of was?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, this has been a fantastic discussion. Wes, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. And I know lots of our listeners are going to be thrilled to have this one come to air. So thank you again, and safe travels.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the Squeaky Wheel podcast. So, Phil, what did you think of the interview with Wes Marshall?
I thought it was a really good interview, Irene. Well done. And my impressions of Wes from your interview is that he's a quiet-spoken man with a lot of courage. Because as a career traffic engineer before joining academia, it wouldn't have been easy to publish a book with such a provocative title and content. I thought it was interesting that his book has been banned by some of the USA state DOTs, which is their Departments of Transport, but that at least some of those employees are still reading the book and forming grassroots discussion groups. I also found Wes's example where after someone was killed at a dangerous intersection, they actually raised the speed limit and then they raised it again later on after someone else was killed. I thought that was truly astounding.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really shocking example, wasn't it?
And it really shows how the system really is broken and it needs work. It needs someone like Wes to point out the shortcomings.
Yeah, I mean, you say that he's courageous or brave, but the word that he used actually was that he was angry.
Yeah, that's right.
And he turned that anger into, this book, which is actually trying to make a difference in the world. And also, I think we need to congratulate him that it's not a dry tome as well. If you get into it, there's really some interesting sort of references that he links to that, it's a kind of a tough subject, but he keeps it accessible, I think, to people who are non-engineers. And I think he's really done a great job, and that this book is going to be the wake-up call for the profession to really just be more evidence-based in how they're working. So, great privilege to speak with him.
We're coming to the end of our podcast, but as always, before we go, we finish with What's Up, a chance to tell you what we're up to and any news you might be interested in. What's up, Irene?
I attended a webinar today that was very interesting, showing the results of the new National Walking and Cycling Participation Survey across Australia and New Zealand. It was interesting to see that safety is still one of the top barriers to getting more people on bikes. Very interesting report. So I encourage people to go and have a look at that. As for C-Sense, we are still in the thick of the conference season. So I'm just back from Perth, as you know. Next week I'm in Barcelona for the Tomorrow Mobility Smart City Expo. Then coming back from that to another conference down in Hobart, actually, which is the leisure conference happening there. And then ITS Australia have another one in the Gold Coast. And then that's it. I will be done for the conferences this year. Thank goodness. I want to stay home and ride my bike.
I don't blame you. You've been jumping around like a blowfly in a bottle.
That's a great expression. No, it's lots of fun. It's really good to meet people face to face. And the Barcelona trip will be my first trip in the Northern Hemisphere this year. And I know you've done plenty yourself, Phil, but this will be my first trip in the Northern Hemisphere. So I'm looking forward to that.
So yesterday I received my hard copy of the first edition of the newly launched book from the hosts of the War on Cars podcast from Brooklyn, New York. It's called Life After Cars. Have you heard about that book at all, Irene?
Of course, yeah. It's all over the social media at the moment. I can't really miss it.
They're drumming up publicity in an unbelievable way. So I'm about a third of the way through it already. Sat down last night and got stuck into it. It's very fast-paced, engaging read. I thought it was interesting how they don't even have a picture of a car on the front cover, but of a traffic light being overgrown by plants because it's redundant. I think that highlights something that would not occur to most people, and that's that traffic lights are only required because of motorised vehicles. Even the busiest footpaths and bike lane intersections in Europe don't need traffic lights because everyone is travelling at human scale speeds. And if they're riding, they're on human scaled vehicles, and force equals mass times acceleration. So a right angle collision between two bike riders or two scooters, while not ideal, is not going to leave you dead and almost certainly not going to leave you hospitalised.
No, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really.
I know I did a study tour when I went to Velocity a few years ago in Amsterdam, and a particular intersection, they'd taken out the traffic lights when it wasn't completely non-car, but it was more bike and pedestrian than car. And they decided, I think it will work better without the lights. And they took the lights out and it's been working just fine. Just imagine what those state DOTs in America might think of that. But it just goes to show what works in the real world. And then last weekend I went to Bateman's Bay, which is on the south coast of New South Wales, for the first annual Sea Otter Australia event. It's a licensed version of the original Sea Otter in the USA and the very successful Sea Otter Europe that's held each year in Spain. It was a great success, and I couldn't get around the expo in the full day that I allocated, so I've already booked a hotel room for next year so I can spend 2 days down there. This is a pretty much all-encompassing cycling festival, and the thing I liked most was seeing so many kids of every age riding bikes, and they've been well catered for with schools, training sessions, entertainment, and their own junior race events. So I came away from that event on a real high. I thought it was great.
Oh, that's great that you got to go to that. I think it's the first time it's been in Australia as well, right? I know the Sea Otter is really well known over in the US.
That's right. There were quite a few international exhibitors. The global reputation of that event is great, but you're correct. This was the first one in Australia. And the organisers in Australia have got a 10-year licensing agreement, and they really worked hard on this one. The organisation, the state of the facilities and that was first class. So I think they're in for the long haul, which is great.
I'm sorry to miss that actually, but I was in Perth and
you can't be everywhere.
Can't be everywhere.
Well, thanks for listening to the Squeaky Wheel podcast. If you like what you heard, then please subscribe via your favourite podcast platform. We're planning to release 1 new episode per month on the third Thursday of each month.
Please also leave us a review or rating on your preferred platform. This is extremely helpful in boosting our algorithms, especially on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also find out more about the Squeaky Wheel podcast and contact us directly via our website, squeakywheelpodcast.com. We love to hear your feedback.
Yes, indeed we would. Thanks very much, Irene, and until next month, keep squeaking.